Welcome to Rooted and Rising Healing. I'm your host, Hallie Roderick, and this space is for women rebuilding after betrayal. Here we make sense of what happened, find truth again, and reconnect with who you really are beyond the pain. Whether you're staying, leaving, or still in the middle, your story matters. Together, we'll explore truth, clarity, and the quiet courage it takes to rise from the wreckage of what was into the wholeness of who you're becoming. You're safe to be here. In the messy middle, in the rebuilding, and in the rising. Let's begin. Welcome to today's episode of the Rooted and Rising podcast. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm so glad that you're here. I've been thinking a lot lately about if I could sit across from the woman I was in the very beginning, shortly after I discovered betrayal in my life. That version of me that was in shock. The woman who was Googling everything I could possibly think of in the middle of the night. The part of me that was trying to hold everything together while my world inside was falling apart. I would take her hand and I would look her in the eye and I would say, "You're not crazy. This is trauma and you're not failing. And here's a few things that I wish you knew right now. Things that would save you so much time, so much self-abandonment, so much unnecessary suffering." So today's episode is for the woman in the early days. And it's also for the woman years in who still needs permission to maybe soften. These are things that I wish I would have known at the beginning of my healing journey. And the first one that I wish I would have known is that betrayal trauma isn't just about heartbreak or emotional pain. It's not just about sadness or anger or disappointment. Betrayal trauma is a nervous system injury. What I wish I could have told myself that my body wasn't just overreacting. It was responding exactly the way a body responds when safety is shattered. And that is with hypervigilance, with panic, with intrusive thoughts, numbness. And those aren't signs that you're crazy. They're signs that your nervous system is trying to protect you. I wish I would have known sooner to start doing the nervous system work, the grounding, the connecting to my breath, getting the somatic support, the trauma-informed therapy. Because healing isn't just about understanding what's happened. It's about helping your body learn that you're safe again. It's about creating that internal safety for yourself. And it took me years into recovery before I really gave any attention to the somatic piece of healing. And that is why I preach it so much now, because it has been probably one of the most impactful things that I've done in my healing journey is to do the work to heal the impact of trauma on the body. That helped me to step out of the automatic reactions and be able to make calculated decisions, like logical decisions rather than just automatic reactions to things. Is it perfect? No, it isn't. Because the underlying programming, that autonomic nervous system is constantly going automatic. And have my triggers fully gone away? No. But do I deal with them in a different way? Yes. And that has made a big difference. And so that's why you hear me talk about it a lot on this podcast. And if you work with me in any capacity, that it's so important that we do the work to heal our nervous system. So that is probably the number one thing I wish I would have been either educated on or had the capacity to listen to it. Maybe people did tell me that, did encourage that, but I didn't have the capacity. I didn't think that's what I needed. I thought I just needed somebody to fix some things and to change some things and for a few things to get better, and then I would be better. And so number one is pay attention to the impact on your body. This is a nervous system injury, and we have to treat it that way. The second thing that I wish I would have known more about is boundaries, because at first I thought boundaries were like a list of rules or punishments or maybe even ultimatums or these walls that were going to keep me protected. And what I didn't realize was that boundaries are actually about establishing my own inner authority, which I don't think before betrayal that I had actually ever done. And so that was hugely important for me to establish what was my inner authority. What did it sound like? And so in a way, when you can establish that inner authority, you start to say, this is what I need. This is what I will participate in. This is what I will no longer abandon myself for. And really slowing down long enough to know what that inner authority is telling you. So healthy boundaries aren't about controlling somebody else, but they're about anchoring back into yourself. And I wish I would have known sooner that boundaries weren't mean, that boundaries are clarifying and that they're protective, and that they're really the beginning of self-trust. And self-trust was huge in learning to reestablish that inner authority and self-trust. I've done a couple earlier episodes on that. So if you want more on that, go ahead and jump back to a couple of my previous episodes on inner authority and boundaries and values and all of those things. So there's some good episodes previously. The other thing that I wish I would have known is how important the other women were going to be in my healing journey. I had no idea how important other women would become to my healing. The first time I jumped into a support group, I was terrified. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want anybody to see me. I didn't want anybody to know what I was going through. And before I left that first meeting, I felt such a huge relief. I remember saying to myself, oh my gosh, these are my people. Where have they been? And so I wished I would have given myself that gift of finding other, what I now call sisters in the work. I can honestly tell you that some of the people that I met early in my recovery journey are some of my dearest, closest friends today. And what happens when we get together is our nervous systems just calm. Like we regulate each other's nervous systems, and it is the most beautiful thing. They don't live near me, most of them, and so I don't get to be with them very often. But anytime that I do, I just am reminded how important that those trusted women were in my circle of support. So support groups, trusted friends. I am very fortunate to have a couple of people in my local, like real life world who are trusted friends, who do fully know me, who do know my story, who I feel totally safe with. And they are invaluable to me. They are literally like my sisters. I love them. Other mentors, the other women who have helped walk me down this path. I ran into one of my early therapists at a professional conference and got to reconnect with her, and just the love I felt for her, for seeing me, for being with me in those early days, and for helping me to realize that it was going to be okay and giving me those early tools that I needed to take the next step forward. And so these are the women that I now refer to as my recovery sisters, and I love them. And there is something so powerful about being witnessed by women who understand you. So please don't discount that. I know it can feel like women can be a threat. Sometimes we have to work through that, especially if your spouse or your partner betrayed you with another woman. Women can feel like a threat. But when you find the safe women who get you and who have been where you are, it's like the safety is almost instantaneous. They know the importance of confidentiality. They know the importance of being able to be whatever's present for you that day, whether that's sadness or you're celebrating or whatever. There's just a safety that comes from that. Women who don't minimize, women who don't rush, women who remind you of who you are when the trauma kind of comes up and makes you forget. Because healing doesn't happen in isolation. Betrayal is so lonely, and no one should walk this journey alone. But recovery is relational. And I wish I would have reached out to a sisterhood sooner. And I'm so grateful for my tribe today and love them. And you know who you are if you're listening to this. The next thing I wish I would have known and surrendered is that I can't fix him, and it's not my job. This one would have saved me so much time and so much exhaustion. I thought if I could just say the right thing or do the right thing or explain it perfectly or hold it together enough, then maybe he would change and it would be fine. But healing requires surrender. I can't do his work for him. You can't do your work for him. I can't love him enough into wholeness. It's not my job to manage his recovery. My job is to stay rooted in my healing, to do my work, to keep coming back home to myself, and to let him be responsible for him. And as I started to do that, it was interesting how he actually stepped into that work. the more I surrendered it, he was doing it for himself and not for me. And if he doesn't do that, if you're in a situation where your partner isn't willing to do that work, then that's good information for you to know as well. You don't want to have to drag him to therapy or drag him to group or check and make sure he knows when his next meeting is or ask him how he's doing on his recovery work. That's not your job. That puts us in that like parent-child role or teacher-student role. And I don't know about you, but I just want my spouse to be my partner. I don't want to be his teacher and I don't want to be his mother. And so as we surrender that, it empowers them to step into it if they're going to choose that. The next thing I wish I would have known is that sometimes getting a little time apart isn't bad. I used to think that if we spent time apart or if we were in a separation, that would mean we were in the next step to divorce, that things were falling apart, we were never going to make it. And I thought that meant failure. Like if we needed some space from each other, then something was wrong. But what I wish I would have known sooner is that sometimes time apart is what allows our nervous system to settle. And when we have a settled nervous system, then we can start to see through the dysregulation. Clarity can start to emerge and to settle in. This is where self-trust can be rebuilt. I look back on some of the earliest times. I remember the first time I decided I was going to go away for a weekend by myself. And I booked a little Airbnb out on the edge of nowhere where there was peace and quiet. I was away from the city. And it felt so empowering and it felt so good. I never turned the TV on the whole time. I read, I wrote, I sat in the quiet, I went for a hike, I ate what I wanted, when I wanted, I slept when I wanted, I did what I wanted, and it was so empowering to me, and I cherish those times alone now, and encourage my husband to do the same so that he can feel what that's like. So space can actually be stabilizing rather than destabilizing. It can be protective. It can be a place where you stop living in constant reactivity and you start anchoring into your own truth. Distance isn't always about abandonment or failure. Sometimes it's about wisdom. And I wish I would have known that sooner. The other thing that I wish I would have known about and taken advantage of sooner is how impactful in-person healing spaces can be. When we do our intensives now, or when I host a retreat or help facilitate an in-person event, sometimes my body is reminded that, oh my gosh, this is what safety really feels like. And oh, okay, I can breathe again. And when we do those intensives, sometimes the women that come into those spaces are feeling that for the very first time. And I love to see that awareness and that light bulb come on of like, I don't know that I've ever felt what true safety actually feels like. And the relief that can come from that. And just that reconnection to your breath and your body and in that safe environment with other women, like I was referring to before. I remember the first time I went to an in-person event. Again, I was terrified because I didn't know what to expect. I wasn't sure I wanted people to know anything about me. And the safe container was created. And by probably within the first hour of being there, I felt my body settle. I felt my body relax. I started to realize that I was safe and that this was okay and that I could connect with these women and I could be vulnerable and I could share what was real. And in these in-person events, I think there's so much work can happen in a short amount of time if you're in the right environment. You're away from the daily triggers. You're supported by experts. You're surrounded by other people who get it. And it really can open up new pathways. It can create momentum. It can help you move if you feel stuck. It can help you shift. And it reminds you that healing is possible. So that's another thing I really wish I would have known is to start taking advantage of some of those opportunities to be in person with other professionals and women in these healing environments. So if you're thinking that might be something you want to consider, check the show notes because I have a couple options for that coming up soon. And would love to have you join me. And then the last thing that I want to share that I wish I would have known is that I wish I would have had more self-compassion for me in the early days. In the beginning, I was in shock, literal shock. I was in survival mode. My nervous system was constantly flooded. I overfunctioned. I pushed. I tried to hold life together like nothing was happening for myself, for my kids, for the people around me. And I wish I could go back and tell that version of myself that you don't have to be so strong for everybody else right now. This was trauma. Rest is not weakness. You're doing great. You don't have to hold it all together for everyone. Healing requires grace and tenderness and space, and you're not behind, and you're not failing. You're responding to something that's really overwhelming. And I so wish I could go back and help my younger self see that. So if I could wrap all of this into one message, it would be healing begins when you stop abandoning yourself, when you learn to listen to your body, when you claim your inner authority, when you let community hold you, when you release what actually isn't yours to carry, and when you start to rise, rooted, supported, and becoming. And I promise you that if at this point in time you don't like yourself, the more you stick with this journey and the more you do your healing work and you get support, you're going to actually come out on the other end and you're going to love yourself, maybe more than you ever have. And I want that for you more than anything. So if you would like to connect with me in any way, check the show notes. I would love to meet any of you in person. And I hope that you'll continue to be here with me every week as we continue to talk about important parts and aspects of healing. We'll see you next week. Thank you for being here with me inside Rooted and Rising Healing. Remember, healing isn't a destination. It's a returning to your truth, to your voice, to the woman you were always meant to be. You have the power to rise at your own pace, in your own way. And when it feels hard, just come back to your breath and remind yourself, still I rise. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love if you shared it with another sister on the journey. And until next time, stay rooted, stay rising. You've got this.